Goody, here it comes.
Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show.
You are interested in the unknown, the mysterious, the unexplainable. That is why you are here.
Oh my God, don't stop now!
With your hosts, Brian, John, and Elaine.
Welcome to the Cinema Psycho Show, the madhouse for film freaks and film fans of all types. I'm your host, Brian Coddington, joined by my fellow co-host and filmmaker, John Woolscroft.
And the very best thing of all, there's a counter on this ball, so skip it. Skip it. Skip it like your life means it, damn it.
What? Wow. I don't know what that has to do with Hannibal, but...
Well, cool. I do have a delicious plate of fava beans and a nice Chianti, or I should
that
say
was Silence of the Lambs.
Like
that's not
him.
the sequel. That's not the sequel, dude. That's not the sequel.
Yeah, so we will be talking about Hannibal today.
We've been teasing this episode for a little bit, and figure might as well deliver on it eventually, sometime this year.
Just a couple switcheroos on the old calendar. You know, had to be adjusted. No biggie.
Yeah,
That's
no
life
biggie.
in the fast lane, baby.
That is life in the fast lane. If you mean fast lane as the quarantine lane, but okay, I mean whatever. But yeah, we're talking about Hannibal, and this movie is one that I think divides so many people. Like, it's not as bad. Like, no one goes in saying like, "Oh yes, I love Hannibal," and I don't know anyone who just says they love Hannibal. But it's like, it's not that bad. But then you have some people who, like, you'll get people on the other end of the spectrum who look at something like Hannibal Rising and they go like, "Oh, we all agree that is shit."
Yeah.
But then this one, they're like, it's all right. But then some people are like, it's fucking terrible. It doesn't feel like anything like the original. And I think it's one of those problems, and we're going to talk about this, where you're trying to be like Silence of the Lambs is one of those movies that you can never really attain the level of again. Like, I really, truly believe that. It's a lightning in a bottle type thing where, I mean, honestly, a horror movie that won Oscars is right there, an oxymoron. Doesn't ever happen. Right. So, like, you're already at that level. You're never going to get that back to that level again. But the story behind this movie is a little interesting. And there's got, like, a lot more than I ever realized with it after I saw it again. I never was a big, Hannibal Lecter fan. I mean, he's all right, I guess. I like the TV show Hannibal a lot.
Oh, see, I guess that's like where we differ, because I'm crazy about Hannibal Lecter. I'm a Lecter groupie, and it's funny that you mentioned that you don't hear very often that many people who love this movie. I actually selected this one because I actually do love this movie, and I feel like like you said, I'm completely on the sidelines of. I mean, I love Silence of the Lambs. I enjoy Red Dragon and Manhunter. Yeah, you're right. Hannibal Rising is shit. I actually didn't see the TV series.
The TV series is really good. Yeah. It's really good. I suggest, if you love Hannibal Lecter and you love that world, like my wife and I, we binged it, and because she had seen it, she had seen the TV series already, and she's like, "Listen, we're not. This is in the middle of the quarantine, beginning stages of it, and we're just like." Yeah, what are we going to watch on Netflix? I don't know. We watched Tiger King, and I watched Tiger King. She hated it. But, I'm like, what about Hannibal? It's on Netflix, And she's like, oh, yeah, you'd like that. I'm like, okay, well, let's watch it. And I binged the whole series. And it's really good. Especially for you, John, if you really love that world, then it's your cup of tea. But, I don't know what it is. Like, I guess I like my monsters to not be this realistic. I guess that's my thing is I prefer my monsters to kind of be like, dream demons or, demons that come out of some kind of golden box or, I like those sorts of things. I don't know. It seems too real. Like, especially because he's a well-to-do asshole who just likes to eat people. But this movie, I remember when this movie came out, and I remember people were losing their shit over it. Like, the run-up to it was crazy.
Yeah, well, like you said, it was, a sequel to an Oscar-winning movie, and the idea that this was, I think, one of only 3 movies to hit like the big 5. I'm sorry, I'm talking about Silence of the Lambs, I should say. Best film, director, screenplay, actor, and actress.
Yeah.
I think that hadn't happened since It Happened One Night back in like the 30s. So yeah, I mean, and Hannibal Lecter as the character had become kind of a rock star, which might have been part of the problem. And I should say that this is another edition of our Really That Awful. I think we kind of hinted at it, but to be clear, we're exploring exactly why this film isn't as beloved, say by the audience and by critics who kind of, I wouldn't say lambasted it, but they gave it a hard time, and kind of a middle of the road, like 2 out of 5 kind of reviews and things like that.
I still go with, I blame its success. I blame Silence of the Lambs' success on that. I think people and the critics especially were like, you were at an A+++, and anything beneath that we cannot accept. And I think that's part of it. But I also do think that there are some behind-the-scenes drama, if you will, that contributed to some of the goofiness that some people who don't like this movie. Like, I didn't hate this film watching it, but I can see where people have problems with it. I really can.
Yeah, and I've read the book. I've read all 3 of the books. Well, actually, I've read all 4 of the books. I tried to get Hannibal Rising, even the book, out of my brain.
I saw that one in theaters.
Yeah, me too.
I saw it in theaters because I was like, oh, it's one of those movies. I think Hannibal Rising came out like in February.
Yeah, like 2007.
Nothing good ever comes out in February. February, March is pretty much and I would say even January to some degree, right after Christmas, is pretty much the dumpster of movies. You will never get a good movie that comes out during January, February, and early March. I say early March because Marvel has made it now a thing where, guess what? End of March to April is when now the A or B list Marvel films come out. Like I know that Captain America, I think the Winter Soldier came out, I think in March or April of that year.
Around then, yeah.
And that was unusual because again, March, January, and February are kind of the dumpster months. But I saw it in theaters, and I'm just like, so let me get this straight. He's banging his aunt? Okay.
Yeah.
That's, I guess, that's a thing. I mean, okay. And then eats his sister. Okay. And I was like, is this actually in the book? And I think it actually is in the book.
Yeah.
So it's not the movie's terrible. It's the book ain't that great.
Yeah, no, his books like took a decline. Like there was like Red Dragon was very good, and then Silence of the Lambs was a great book. Hannibal was a bit of a decline. Hannibal Rising was just a steep going down. But the reason I mentioned reading the book is that if you felt that this movie was like dark and creepy and morose and violent, like it's actually nothing compared to the book.
Really?
The book is a lot worse, especially the including of Mason Verger's muscle-bound sister, who is not in the movie.
She's
thankfully,
in the series.
Yeah, but so there. Honestly, the screenplay is fairly accurate to the book. So I mean, that's where if anybody has a problem with it, that's where it starts.
Except the ending. Ending's not accurate to the book.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
No, it's not. That's not. That's where people have issues. I mean, they have issues through a lot of it, but that's a big one.
A little Hannibal history here. The first movie actually was Manhunter, which very few people saw. It's not an Anthony Hopkins joint.
No, it's a Michael Mann movie, isn't it?
Yeah, Michael Mann movie. Brian Cox played Hannibal Lecter, and Manhunter was based on the first book, Red Dragon.
Yep.
And then Silence of the Lambs came out, kind of ignoring Manhunter completely. And then, obviously, as we mentioned, that blew up. Yay, everybody loves it. And then, obviously...
Filmed in Pittsburgh, by the way.
Yeah, a lot of it. A lot of it.
Yeah, a lot of filmed in Pittsburgh.
And then we get, Hannibal, and everybody's, excited for that one because it's the follow-up to Silence of the Lambs. You got Anthony Hopkins back. Dino De Laurentiis is producing, but it seems like everybody else is new on the scene here. and then they got the reception that we're going to talk about today, and then eventually they remade Red Dragon as Red Dragon, and then Hannibal Rising and the TV show, and now Lunchbox.
I didn't mind Red Dragon. I actually liked Red Dragon. For the most part. It was pretty decent.
I liked both Manhunter and Red Dragon. I hate to be this guy and be this number. Like, the book was better.
Well, listen here. First of all, the book is always better. Okay, the book will always be better. The reason why, and I think we might have mentioned this at one time, is that the book is the visuals are created in your head. So, in essence, you're the director making your own movie in your head. So, yeah, the book is always going to be better because it's your vision. And then when you go to see the movie, you're like, it's not the way it turned out, the way in my head. It's like, well, no shit.
Yeah.
So yeah, the book is always going to be better, no matter what.
And it's an 800-page book, and it's a 2-hour movie. They had to choppy.
There is that too. There is that too. So let's kind of jump into. Do you want to jump into the plot of this movie?
Yeah. Let me try to do this as briefly as possible. I feel like people are listening to this; they know it. But so after Silence of the Lambs, Hannibal is on the lamb, and one of the 10.
You son of a bitch. You had to do that, didn't you?
Just a little bit. But yeah, he's one of the 10 most wanted men in America because he did escape at the end of the previous film. He is living in Florence, and we have a man, DePazzi, who is...
DePazzi.
Yeah, who knows that he is Hannibal Lecter because he's not really hiding it. He has a new name, but... Yeah.
Really, he is not hiding it at all.
In the book, he had plastic surgery to look different, but in the movie, they're like, well, it's Anthony Hopkins. We can't have him look different, because people expect to see him. So, but yeah, and, DePazzi finds out that, he is Hannibal Lecter and he wants to collect a reward from Mason Verger, who is a very deformed child rapist who Hannibal Lecter drugged and convinced him to cut off his own face. Yes, that's the kind of movie that we're dealing with here.
Oh, it means Silence of the Lambs. You have to go big.
Yeah. And Clarice Starling is back here. She's having a lot of trouble by a lot of bullshit in the FBI. And she gets to go back onto the celebrated Lecter case. And, shall we say, shenanigans ensue.
That's pretty much it. There's a lot of weird things that happen in this movie, and like the biggest thing that I think the critics kind of said about this was that it was kind of all over the place. Like there's moments of it where you're dealing with Clarice Starling and her kind of, I would say kind of PTSD of having been the big person behind the Lecter case, and now kind of how do you go from that? How do you go from doing such a high profile thing? You killed Buffalo Bill and everything that goes with it, and you're going back to normal. Like, quote unquote.
You went from being a brunette to a ginger.
Yeah, I mean there is that. You went from being Jodie Foster to Julianne Moore. How'd you do that? It's amazing.
You went from being 5'2" to 5'7". It's incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible. But it deals with a little bit of that. Then you got this whole Italian back scene to it as well, with a lot of things that kind of the whole relationship between Pazzi and Lecter, and at the same time in the background you've got creepy Mason Verger, played by the great Gary Oldman. I say the great Gary Oldman because that man, oh man, if there was a acting, like I'm not going to say acting award because there are, but like if you had to say who is an actor, I'd say Gary Oldman is the quintessential actor. If you had to say who is the best actor you can think of, Gary Oldman. I'd also say Anthony Hopkins. You got both of them in this movie.
Oh, wait, no. It's not Gary Oldman. It's uncredited.
Oh, really? Did he do that?
Yeah, because, he wanted his name on the poster. He wanted, like, Hopkins, Moore, and then Oldman. And they're like, nah, fuck you, dude. And he went, all right, well, I don't want any credit in the movie then. And if you check the credits, there is, there's nobody who plays Mason Verger in the movie.
Oh, they didn't do a Boris Karloff and say, oh, it's the monster?
Mason Verger as
the monster.
The monster, yeah.
Yeah. But, I mean, you've got that all going on, and then there's this whole weird thing with Ray Liotta, who it's a whole bizarre thing between him and Clarice Starling, where you think Ray Liotta wants to, like, you know, fuck Clarice a couple times in this, and it's really weird. Like, I think the biggest thing the critics had against it was that it's inconsistent. At least the tone of it's inconsistent, and I can kind of see those points.
Yeah. Well, it's not as focused as Silence of the Lambs, too. Like, Silence of the Lambs is actually, it's almost like a Hemingway thing in that there's brilliance in its simplicity. Yeah. You know,
I mean, it really is. It
was so centralized and almost claustrophobic. This movie is kind of like, it's almost like one of those video games that's open world. You know, there's so much going on. But yeah, shall I mention a few of the things, since we really like to do this here on Really That Awful, of kind of the okay, we get it on why people probably don't like this very much?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. It is ridiculously gory. Now, I love it for that, but I know a lot of people probably were turned off by it.
Is it though? I don't know. I don't know. I guess my problem is, like, the previous film, Silence of the Lambs, literally had a cop who was kind of strung up and ripped open. So I think if that's the marker, that, like, that last scene that we're going to talk about here, the famous scene that most people, when they think of this movie, that's the scene they think of. That's pretty bad. But I don't know. I compare it to that one, and I'm like, that one kind of has the win. You had Buffalo Bill, who literally was skinning people and wearing their skin. Okay, so yeah, I get it.
Well, there is that saying.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, it's the light you don't turn on, and a lot of things, like, you know, as you mentioned, the guy being strung up is not this, but it's, you know, the light you don't turn on, and so many things are suggested, you know, that aren't shown. You know, and I remember,
funny thing about that, that location is in Pittsburgh, and it's where my brother got his wedding reception at.
Yeah, if you go up to that room, there's a little sign out front, because Pittsburgh never misses their moments of fame. It's like, Hannibal Lecter room. Yeah.
I mean, if someone ever, you find that the Hannibal Lecter room is like, hey, look at this, you know, it's at a place called Soldiers and Sailors Memorial, and quite literally, I remember, like, oh yeah, this is that room, isn't it? And that's where my brother had his wedding reception at.
And that's where you and I spent, like, every graduation thing, and I working with Kristen, just like hours upon hours running cable.
Here's the thing: you did that for like what, 3 years? I did that for a good, like, 7. So, because I ran that. But yeah, it's the same sort of thing of. You know, that place gets used for a bunch of different events, and it just happened to be the right kind of creepy location for that scene in Silence of the Lambs. But anyway, you were mentioning about the gore.
Yeah, and the thing of, like, my mom, like, she was she loved Silence of the Lambs, so she was turned off by this movie. And I remember this, even though, my God, it was 20 years ago now. When we got home, she had mentioned that in the first movie, Chilton hands Jodie Foster, you know, a photo and says, you know, this is what he did, you know, to this person. And she's looking at the photo, and you could see, like, almost her stomach turning. We never see the photo, but it's implied, you know, and it allows your mind to make up what's in that image if you even want to go there. But then, you know, she mentioned in this movie, there's a videotape, a surveillance tape of him being examined and then just attacking, you know, the orderly and biting her face. And she said, you know, it was so much better in Silence of the Lambs because it was just suggested, and in this movie it just throws it in your face.
I mean, I get that. I also think that in that regard, you have two different directors, and if you know anything about, you know, Ridley Scott, I mean, he does kind of tend to show.
He's not a man known for his subtlety.
No, he's not. He's not a man known for his subtlety. He definitely does show a lot when he has to show a lot. I mean, he did Gladiator. If you watch Gladiator, I mean, you can see so much blood and gore in that movie. And that came out actually about, I think, a year or so. Did it come out exactly a year before this?
Yes.
Yeah, it was 2000 when Gladiator
He was a
came
busy
out.
little beaver.
He was. So, I mean, he's coming off the heels of that, which, you're showing all the gore and everything like that with the Roman era. So I get it. And then on top of that, again, the man made Alien, and Alien does show quite a bit. But I think it's just different directing styles. That's the biggest thing I can think of.
Yeah. Another thing with this here is that almost no one is likable.
Yeah. I mean, Potsy, you're kind of supposed to like care about him, but
at
he's
least
also
understand
kind of
what he's trying to do.
Piece of shit too. Like he's trying to like. I think the big thing is like you're supposed to sympathize with Hannibal at certain points, right? Like we're supposed to view him as kind of like the hero or anti-hero in this, and so like when Potsy's kind of on his tail, and he's hiring some what is he like hiring some goon, some low level criminal in
goons.
Florence to kind of like do his dirty work. You're like, and then he gets killed, and you're just like, I don't really care. Like he's a piece of shit. So because we didn't mention this, but Potsy's trying to like collect money because Mason Vergers put out this kind of contract of, hey, I'll pay. I forget what the amount he says he's going to pay, but it's a ridiculous sum of money for someone to capture, Hannibal alive. Like they want him captured alive so that Mason can feed him to pigs, because I guess he's got a hard on for pigs. Don't know why.
It sounds like a horrible way to die. So
it does.
Yeah.
It does sound like a horrible way to die, and he figures that one out. Towards the end of the movie.
Oh, sorry to go backtracking here a little bit, but funny story. I remember this actually. There are posters for Gladiator in Hannibal in the scenes where Hannibal's walking through like downtown Florence.
Of course there are.
So
Of course there are.
The thing is, I think actually, besides forgiving his ego, I think it actually was accidental. They didn't change anything of the streets, and so there just happened to be Gladiator posters. He didn't take them down, but I don't think he planted them either.
He's just like, I'm not taking those down. Those are my movies. Yeah, fuck it. I want my movie shown.
That's but the thing about people being likable, that's a difficult thing when Hannibal Lecter is essentially the central character. I mean, you could still make the argument it's still Clarice, but in Silence of the Lambs, he's this kind of caged animal, and I think he's like in the movie for like 11 minutes. He's basically what the T-Rex is in Jurassic Park, and a little more sophisticated. But you can find him like macabrely humorous, but he's on the sidelines. He's the main character, so you almost have to root for him, even though he's a vile, sadistic, emotionless cannibal, and that's kind of a hard thing to pull off.
Yeah, I mean, I think the classic thing, he's the anti-hero. That's if we had to describe Hannibal in this, he is the anti-hero. We hate to root for him because we know that deep down he's not a good guy. He's not. He likes to eat people. He threatens to eat Potsy's wife. Like, and we're pretty sure he does. Like, I mean, pretty sure that before he goes back to Baltimore, that he probably ate her. At least that's why in my head I kind of figured that one. But yeah, I mean, you're not supposed to root for this guy, but you do. And honestly, it's the same sort of thing in the TV show too. You root for Hannibal in it, even though you're like, he's a bad guy. He's a bad guy. But yeah, I mean, are there anything else that you think that people kind of see about this movie as, we don't like it, but that we can understand?
I think a big one here is that it's not Silence of the Lambs, and we had mentioned this a little bit, so we'll only briefly talk about it here. But there was no way that it could be. There's no way to live up to that. I'm not necessarily doing an apples to apples here, but Citizen Kane 2. It's not going to be the first one.
The biggest analogy I can think of are the Psycho sequels.
Yeah.
So the movie Psycho, okay, it comes out, blows everyone the fuck away. Every sequel that's come out to Psycho since, like I think they add up to what Psycho 4? I think that was the last one with Anthony Perkins.
Yep. And then the remake and the TV show.
And then they did a remake. Yeah. But either way, the point is, every single sequel to Psycho has just reminded you why Psycho is amazing, and that movie is not. I think there are some people who do like some of those sequels. I'm not one of them. I really am not. I could never get into any of them, and I'm just like, this isn't Psycho. Because in my head, I'm like, you already made the perfect movie. You already did.
Yeah.
I mean, as much as I dislike Hitchcock as a human being, and he is a horrible human being, he made a brilliant film. And his wife edited a brilliant film. I'll mention that one too. Not a lot of people know that. But his wife edited a brilliant film. And honestly, anything else after that, you don't really need it. Some movies don't need to have a bajillion sequels to it. You know?
Yeah.
They're not made for it. But I think you're right. I think a lot of people in their head, when they went to see this movie, thought, oh, I'm going to get basically a continuation of Silence of the Lambs, and you're not getting it. Because, as we mentioned, different director, different material, different actors and actresses. I mean, you left Silence of the Lambs, and it was Jodie Foster, and now you've got, Julianne Moore. So, I mean, there is a lot to that to say.
And if you want to hear more about Psycho, dear Psychos Nation, you can check our archive. I believe it's episode 150, where we go into detail about that franchise.
You just pulled that one up right now to make sure you knew what number it was. But yeah. I mean, some things that I want to say that, I found that I did not like while watching this.
Okay.
Was mainly the fact that it sounds to me like, while they were producing this film, Clarice Starling is made to kind of be, and I have not read the book, so I'm kind of going off of what I'm watching the movie, what I've read in reviews. It sounds to me like Clarice Starling is slowly, through the course of this movie, kind of going into a descent into madness. And it stops short at the end.
Yeah.
And I think that pisses people off, because she's kind of, alienated the FBI. She's got creepy Ray Liotta, which, guess what? If you're going to have anyone be a creepy bastard, Ray Liotta kind of is the quintessential one. He always plays these horrible human beings.
Take that, Ray.
No, but he does. He does.
Yeah.
That's his thing. Except for, what movie was it? It's from the 90s. I think No Escape. Yeah, No Escape, where he's a criminal on the island. He actually plays a hero for once. But
cut.
It's a good movie, by the way. But anyway, like, he plays this creepy fucker who calls, Clarice Starling white trash and just wants to, as I said before, he wants to fuck her. But it, she's dealing with all of this, and at the same time, she's being reminded again about Hannibal and getting kind of sucked into that world again. And you get the feeling that we're getting to a point with this character where she's supposed to join Hannibal's side. And I have a feeling that in the book, that's what happens.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
No, in the book, she doesn't wake up and, she doesn't wake up on her own accord and come downstairs during the whole munchy brainy scene. Hannibal wheels her down there, and he basically puts her under a hypnosis spell for a few days, I think, and just manipulates her under hypnosis to kind of force the final step of her following him, including digging up her dead father, putting his bones on the floor, and under hypnosis giving her the opportunity to say goodbye to her father.
It's fucked up.
So it's a lot of, shall we say, fun imagery. And eventually, he, by just controlling her mind, convinces her to take that final step to join him. And they do go around the world eating people.
See, I don't like that. I actually like the idea that, again, this movie seems to me like they went down this path of making Clarice basically an accomplice to Hannibal towards the end. And then the ending kind of basically negates all that, at least for me. And I think that when people watch this movie, that's one of the things they see, because Clarice it does not become his accomplice. She kind of just somehow makes it out. We don't exactly know. But that's kind of an issue there. But, we find out that she's just that nothing's really changed for her. There's really no arc for her in this, and I think that's a problem, especially because she's kind of the main thread through all of these, through all these different kind of sections of the movie. Be it at the beginning where Hannibal is in Florence, and then with Mason Verger and everything that goes between. Clarice is kind of that one continuing thread that's trying to capture Hannibal. But again, as I feel that this movie is trying to push us to that conclusion of she joins him, and they just kind of chicken out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Yeah, everything's leading there, and then they drop it.
They go limp. That's what I mean. I mean, just you could have gone there, and I didn't know what they were going to be like. Well, it's Clarice Starling; she's a hero. It's like, yeah, but this is a fucked up world that this movie's showing us. So, but yeah, I think that's probably one of the biggest things. Aside from, I think the differences in tone. I think there's some really kind of over the top shit in here, and then there's some kind of what I would call boring stuff. I think a lot of Florence stuff is boring, personally. What did you think?
I love the Florence stuff. I love the beauty of Florence.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful, yeah. But I think that it almost feels to me like we have, I'd say probably 4 different movies or 3 to 4 different movies happening here. That they don't feel cohesively melded together. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that works for an 800-page book. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's hard to transfer that to the cinema.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. So with that said, what are some good things that you feel in this movie?
So for me, and I know this is surface level, but to me, it's a beautiful film. The cinematography, the editing, the style of the film. As a filmmaker, I was drawn into this world because of the stylization and a lot of the editing techniques that Ridley Scott uses. You see some of the same kind of shit in Gladiator, but I think that it's a beautifully constructed movie in terms of, like I said, the cinematography and a lot of the editing. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't hate it. It's just different. You know what I mean? I think that this is a very Ridley Scott movie. It's very much that type of movie. There's a lot of blues and a lot of desaturated areas in this, and that's fine. I'm okay with that, but it kind of screams Ridley Scott. It screams kind of his style of film, and I think it's one of those things where you either love it or hate it. I think I've seen. I think that Silence of the Lambs is a much better example of cinematography and editing. That's just me, though. But I also understand that the style that this came out in. This is early 2000s, and a lot of movies were made like this. Yeah. So it's either you love it or hate it.
I wouldn't necessarily compare the two, or I would just say that this film for what it is I wouldn't say that it's better or worse than Silence of the Lambs in its approach, because they are, even though they're in the same universe, they are grossly different approaches.
Yes. Yeah. What I do like about this is, and I mean I come from this from a visual effects standpoint, is as I do like the visual effects in this. I think it's impressive, especially that munchy scene. I don't think anyone had ever seen that before to that level. I don't think anyone ever seen kind of a munchy scene like that, where you're in essence seeing a combination of prosthetic with a real head at the same time. And I guess that leads us into talking about the munchy scene.
Yeah, and I think that turned a lot of people off. But I mean, I have as one of my notes here, what exactly did people expect?
Exactly.
They had to up everything. Hannibal is not behind a cage. He's free to roam. And yeah, so at the end of this movie, he drugs Ray Liotta and then cracks open his skull. The air is getting into his brain, so he's basically a zombie somewhat at this point. Yeah, he opens the top of his skull and exposes his brain.
That part is awesome.
Yeah. and he
So
starts
fucking
feeding his brain, Ray Liotta's brain, to him. And yeah, I think that it was a lot in the marketing, like, wait till you see the end of this movie. And I think I think a lot of people were like, yeah, wow, man, I can't believe that was the craziest thing I ever saw. And other people were like, yeah, that's where it lost me.
Well, I think the problem is that, again, in this movie, Hannibal is thought of as the anti-hero. And anytime you have an anti-hero, you don't want to think the worst of them, even if they're the anti-hero. So, yeah, when he's killing Mason Verger, yeah, you're like, oh, this is great. Even when he kills Potsy, you're like, oh, I get it. That guy was trying to kill him. He's trying to take him out. But Ray Liotta is a piece of shit. But at the same time, you don't want to see him do something horrible like feed the man's brains to himself. Which, honestly, oh, man. Yeah, you don't go into that movie eating food. Like, I can imagine people snacking up popcorn and nachos during that scene. I lost my appetite.
Oh, man, I should have brought scrambled eggs.
Yeah, but I think that's part of it, is that people kind of got lost in that scene because they still viewed him as the anti-hero, someone you're supposed to not really root for, but you root for him anyway. And when you get that scene of him actually doing the horrible thing that his character has been this whole time, it reminds you that no, he's still a bad guy, and he's still a cannibal, and he's not good. So I think that's part of it. I think people root for him through the whole movie, and then you get that last part, like, Jesus Christ, I can't root for that guy.
And I think one of the big issues with this movie is that it's so much more operatic, and and obviously we get a lot of opera in the movie, which is not accidental. Is that this is taking it to a much more not in a literal sense, but more of a Shakespearean level than Silence of the Lambs. Silence of the Lambs was very isolated, very, very subtle. This one, they decided to open it up, and I think that tonal shift a lot of people had an issue with. That, yeah, like from the outset, this is going to be bigger, bloodier, more intense, more in your face. Everything that was suggested last time is going to be thrown in your face this time, and I felt they really didn't have anywhere to go other than that.
Yeah.
So,
no, I agree. Now, do you want to talk a little bit about some drama behind the scenes? Does you know about some of the drama behind the scenes in this movie?
Well, I know they ran into a lot of trouble in pre-production.
Well, it was the casting of Jodie Foster. That's the biggest one, at least the one I've kind of seen here. Is that they had initially wanted to involve Jodie Foster in the creation of this movie, and she turned it down because of the ending. So to try to sweeten the deal, they changed the ending, and she still took it down. And that's why they cast Julianne Moore, but they didn't change the ending back. So the reason why, because this is something, the reason why that ending feels kind of stupid. Pat, I'm not talking about the Munchie Munchie scene. That part's great.
Everything after that.
Everything after that is fucking stupid. Okay, I'm sorry. It is. I know you like this movie, John, but you got to admit it's fucking stupid, right?
Oh yeah, no.
It's honestly a missed opportunity to not have Clarice go down the path of being kind of an accomplice to Hannibal, and they kept that ending that they had changed in, despite having Julianne Moore. And that was the thing to kind of get Jodie Foster to come on, and she didn't come on, and it was, like it just I think that's kind of the big thing with this, yeah. And then I don't know, what's your thoughts on that whole thing?
Well, I mean, I think that also turned off a lot of people as well. Like, well, they had to get Anthony Hopkins back, so if they had to pay him the all the gold in Fort Knox, then they would have. But when people were like, oh, Jodie Foster isn't returning. Like, what's going on with this movie? Like, why wouldn't she return? Because they obviously got to be paying her a crap ton too. So I think a lot of people started to go, "Hey, wait a minute!" Like, even before, they even started shooting this movie.
Yeah. I think it was. I think she just didn't like the ending. I don't think she liked the fact that Clarice's character, who she played great in that first film, I don't think she cared for the turn. I don't think she cared for that part.
And it's interesting though, because it's kind of inferred at the end of that movie from, Silence of the Lambs, I should say, that it's, when she gets that phone call from Hannibal, is that, as you mentioned earlier, Brian, that she's going to be haunted by that, for the rest of her career. And it's probably going to lead her to losing that optimism that she had and become kind of a jaded FBI person like everyone else around her. So I think this is the natural path for her, but I can understand why Jodie Foster maybe has like a shrine to the Clarice character in her mind, because she did play her.
Yeah. No, I kind of I view that. Moving on from there, do you want to talk about Mason Verger?
Yeah, talk about turning people off.
Do you think he turned people off?
I mean, he's a disfigured billionaire child rapist. But
Gary Oldman just makes him really horrible. Like, makes him. It's the way that he just goes about everything. Like, when he's talking about how he got disfigured, he's got like a smile. You can't really tell he's got a smile on his face because his face is disfigured, but he's just saying it in the most nonchalant way. Like, I used to give, go...
boys and girls do anything for a candy bar.
Yeah, I was going to say that. But it's horrible how he... Like, I think Gary Oldman had fun with this role. Just as I think... I know he didn't have fun with Dracula. That was the last time he had crap tons of makeup on his face. But I think he just had fun with this. He had fun with this role of being a horrible human being who's just full of vengeance but then at the same time revels in his wealth and power. You know what I mean? Like he knows that it doesn't matter what you do to him. He's rich as fuck. Yeah,
as they said in the movie, it's not enough money to buy a senator, but you can rent one from time to time.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
But I did see, like, when we do these really that awful, I read like a variety of different reviews of the movie to try to get a sense of, okay, what did turn off critics. And one thing I saw quite a few times speaking about Mason Verger was, in a nutshell, so many of these reviewers said, and then you see a scene where a man is cutting off his face and then it's being fed to dogs, and all subtlety and nuance is out the window. And that, I think at least 50% of the reviewers said that. And I think that type of graphic nature is where I think a lot of people got lost. And that's very early in the movie when we get the backstory of Mason Verger. Yeah. And it's like, oh, okay, so he's having this guy cut off his own face and he's feeding it to dogs. Like, what is this movie?
I'd say this movie is existing in the world that was set up in Silence of the Lambs. That's what I would say. You're when you're already setting the precedent of this is the world we're in with that first film, you have to one up it. I'm sorry. That's the law of sequels. They always amp up. That's just kind of, and I'm sorry. Ridley Scott is the type of director who, if he's going to show it, he's going to show it. He's not a subtle guy. He's not. I mean, that's part of the reason why people don't like his Alien movies as of late, because they're not very subtle.
Well, they're also piss awful garbage.
They're also piss awful. It's just you should stop. Sorry.
But, the movie is called Hannibal. The movie's not called Clarice. I would expect maybe some subtlety if the movie was solely focused on Clarice or something of that nature, because I think they have a TV show like that coming out soon.
They already do. It's already out.
And but the movie's called Hannibal. Of course, it's going to be a roller coaster of depravity.
What did you think? That's again. I'm going like, what did you think? You have Ridley Scott and you have his style of movie and you have the world of Hannibal. What do you think is going to happen? yeah, you're gonna have people who's gonna be getting cutting off their faces, and it's like, this shit's in the book, dude. Like, you didn't know. Like, as you said, John, a lot of this is, for the most part, in the book. It's there. So I mean, I guess it's stuff that they don't necessarily have to show. Although I will say that, I mean, I recently watched a series on Amazon Prime called Them. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I've seen ads for it.
Okay. If people were complaining about the level of depravity and graphic violence in this movie, they should just never watch the show Them, because it takes it to another level of stuff that honestly make me a little queasy at times. Great show, honestly, really good show about the horrible institution of racism in this country, and also mixing it in a way with horror, so it kind of has kind of that Jordan Peele-esque kind of feel to the show. But I mean, it is something that is an experience that it kind of, I can kind of see where people might have that same sort of reaction to this type of series, but unrelated to Hannibal. But thought I'd mention.
Well, Brian, you mentioned the book and everything, and just to kind of mention Mason's sister. In the book, she is a bodybuilder and a lesbian, but she has to have a child in order to have any stake in the family's fortune.
Yeah.
And it has to be bloodline, so she wants her brother's semen. And at the end of the movie, Hannibal convinces her to have her and her girlfriend stick a cattle prod up his butthole to force him to ejaculate, and then they collect his semen and then shove an eel down his throat to murder him. And when I was reading this, I thought to myself, this is just, Thomas Harris made a bet. Well, what is the grossest, weirdest thing I can write? And it's just like, the subtle nuance of the first two books I had read, I'm like, well, that's just gone.
I'm gonna be honest with you. A lot of
this is almost a cartoon.
A lot of that is in the series. A lot of that's in the series.
Oh, okay.
A lot of that is in the series. A lot of it's in the series. Yeah.
So yeah, there are some. I guess my point is there are some problems with the book to start with, and they have to be. They obviously took a lot of liberties, as we mentioned continuously, with the end, but they have to be fairly honest to the book. And I think old Tommy Harris got paid by the word and said, "Well, I'm just going to put in everything I can think of in my sick mind."
Yeah, pretty much. It's one of those things where it's like, well, I know what they like. They like the gross stuff. So, yeah.
And for really that awful, we mentioned a lot of things like Cable Guy and Death to Smoochie. I think that you and I have more of like a macabre, dark sense, or we're not really bothered by a whole lot of stuff because, Death to Smoochie and Cable Guy, they're just such mean movies. They're mean movies, And like this movie, like I love the violence. I love like the beautiful violence and quite a bit of it. I love a lot of the over the top stuff. I love the morally depraved characters and the horrible violent situations. I can see though how people who aren't as disgusting as me could be very much turned off by that.
Oh yeah, I mean it's one of those things where I like movies where you don't always have to like every character, and that's kind of the thing. There is that if you have a movie where you have to clearly like everyone, that gets old really fast. Okay, and you also you don't want to have a movie where you hate everyone either. So it's kind of a mixed bag of things. I think that the problem this movie has is the precedent that the first film set with it. If we had to pick what is the biggest issue with this, it's that Silence of the Lambs exists. That is the absolute 100% biggest problem, is that people were comparing this film to that film, and they're not the same. They're two different complete movies. I also do think that I don't think the production and the quality of this movie is anywhere near the snuff of the first one. I just don't.
I just think it's different.
It's different, but at the same time, I'm sorry. There's literally the ending. Clarice Starling is out in the middle of the field, right where the boat, the lake's at, and we don't know how she got there. We don't.
Because her ponytail was stuck in the refrigerator and the door handle was broken off.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, it ends with Hannibal threatening to cut her arm off. It cuts to black, which honestly, never cut to black in the middle of a movie. Just please don't. I hate it when that happens. I hate it when it happens. It very rarely is needed. Okay, very rarely is needed. But this cuts to black in the middle of the movie, and it ends up being that she's in the middle of the right by the fucking lake, signaling the cops. Got both her hands. So again, my question is, what happened? We don't know. and it's not like it's a TV series where you'll eventually get the answer 3 episodes down from it. You don't. So I think that it's, especially with the ending, and again, I don't think it's all over the place, but there are some things in this that just don't make any sense. There are some things in this that don't make any sense, and I don't know if it's just they didn't have time or they just had to cut it because that was part of the weirdo ending that they changed for Jodie Foster, but Jodie Foster was like, fuck this, I'm not doing it, and instead decided to do whatever, I forget what movie came out around that time that she decided to do instead, but, I think that it's not nearly as cohesively made as the original is. And it's a hard bar to follow. It really is a hard act to follow. But it's definitely different. And if you're into that, then you'll like it. But I just know for me, like I watched it again after I don't watch this all the time, but I'd probably been about maybe 7-8 years since I'd watched it before. And I followed it, but at the same time, like, yeah, I can see why people don't like this. I really can.
Well, and just to piggyback on that a little bit, I think that, one of possibly a bigger issue than it not being Silence of the Lambs is that, for better or worse, Hannibal Lecter had almost become like a pop culture
Freddy Krueger
punchline,
Yeah.
Because that character just hit with the zeitgeist so much when, Silence of the Lamb came out that how do you do that without it almost being a parody of itself?
Yeah. I mean, I remember, we talked about Cable Guy, and Cable Guy has a scene where Jim Carrey is putting like chicken, he's putting chicken skins on his face, pretending to be saying "Silence of the Lambs," and it's one of those things where it was in the culture at the point where everyone kind of latched on to Hannibal, and Hannibal became what I would say the new Freddy Krueger. He did. Yeah,
and like, everybody did a Hannibal Lecter impression, for better or worse, and quoted the movie. And I think that's possibly why, our beloved New Nightmare, Brian, I think you and I like jerk off to it at least once a day. Yeah. It just wasn't as accepted because this isn't Freddy Krueger, but it's kind of the creature that inspired him, and he's like very sinister and he's not funny, and people are like, I want funny Freddy.
Freddy's not supposed to be funny.
I want the guy from the music video with the fat boys.
That is a deep cut right there. That is a super, super deep cut right there. But yeah, I do think that it is one of the things where, it had to deal with the legacy of Silence of the Lambs. And again, I also think people in this, people were rooting for Hannibal. And when you see Hannibal doing horrible things, it jogs. Remember that, oh yeah, I'm not supposed to like this guy. Yeah. And it's one of the things where, we could talk about Freddy Krueger. I think he's a great analogy for it. Freddy is a child murderer. He's never hinted that he is had sex with children. I mean, it is hinted that he has had sex with children, but it's never implied. It's like, well, what's a horrible thing? We have him kill kids. Okay. But then you see in like the remake, where they clearly say what he's doing. And I hated that part because it made me hate Freddy, and I actually like Freddy. So, but it's the same sort of thing, and from interviews with Wes Craven, he said like, yeah, he did those horrible things, but we really could not say that.
Yeah,
we really couldn't say that, so we said, well, he just kills kids instead. And that because they made that change, Freddy did become part of the culture of the late 80s and I'd say even to now, he's still part of the culture. But it is one of those things where, yeah, you watch the remake and you're like, holy shit, I'm not supposed to like this guy. And I think that's part of what Hannibal did, is it made people say, I'm not supposed to like this guy. And that's why when you go back to Red Dragon, when you get to Red Dragon, we're not spending so much time with Hannibal in that. You know?
Yeah.
It's more or less kind of going back to, well, we're hunting for someone else who's horrible. And he's just kind of on the sidelines.
Well, it's funny, that movie, Red Dragon, ends with, I don't want to say with hope, but, it didn't end as negatively as it could.
Yeah.
But that's also a difference from the book where, Hannibal ends up, giving the Red Dragon, information on where, Ed Norton's character, Will Graham,
Will Graham,
where he lives and stuff, and it ends up destroying his family, and Will ends up losing his mind, and Hannibal Lecter succeeded in doing exactly what he wanted. This guy put him in jail, and so he destroyed his life and made him go insane. So,
yeah,
he's kind of a huge dick in the book that they kind of cut out, and I think a lot of that was, we like Hannibal Lecter, we shouldn't, but he's fun, and so we can't have him destroy this family and cause.
I think that was because of the reaction to Hannibal. I think because they pushed it to the point where people were basically, they had the horribleness of Hannibal Lecter thrust in their faces. That munchy scene right there is the reason why people are like, oh, I'm not supposed to like this guy. He fed this other guy's face to dogs. I'm not supposed to like this guy. Yeah. Okay, and I think that's part of the problem. I really do. But
I would think it would be fascinating if somebody who had somehow never seen any of these movies, I'm sure that I don't think there's a person alive who doesn't at least know that Hannibal Lecter is a cannibal, but what if they had never seen any of the movies, didn't really know too much about him, and they watched Hannibal first? I would find that very fascinating to have people almost watch the movies backwards. Like, would they, if they didn't have the feelings that they had one way or another about Silence of the Lambs at all?
Yeah.
How would they take Hannibal?
It'd be interesting. It'd be really interesting. I think you'd almost have to start with Red Dragon and then go into Silence of the Lambs and then go into actually with Hannibal and see what people's, kind of perception of it would be. But yeah, it would be interesting. I think the fact that people really kind of latched on to Hannibal is part of the reason why they didn't like this movie. I really do. It's supposed to all be about him, and it's like, yeah, he's horrible. You're not supposed to like him.
Well, there's a lot of exploitation, over the top violence and stuff like that, and I think that it is a smarter person's movie. It's not just like a gore fest, torture porn. Like you're going into Saw 5, you know what you're going to get, right?
Yeah.
Like. But so I think that when people who go is like, oh well, he's feeding a dog to the person's face. Oh well, I'm too bougie for this. Like the movie almost at sometimes seems too intelligent for its gore. But if it had been just an exploitation movie, they might have, gotten away with the type of violence more than this movie that does treat itself as being a little bit more cerebral.
Yeah, it's supposed to be the acceptable horror movie. Let's be honest here. This is supposed to be the anti-slasher. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's
the thinking man slasher. Yeah, acceptable is a good way to put it.
Yeah. I mean, that's the only reason why it was given an Oscar. Why the Silence of the Lambs was given an Oscar is because it's a horror movie that is acceptable to the Academy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, that always stuck in my craw. I'm like, you've got no genre movies that win Oscars ever, literally ever. And it's like, well, Silence of the Lambs, like, yeah, is it really a horror movie? Is it? I'd say it's more or less on the drama side than anything. At least I kind of always felt that way. But I do think that Hannibal is probably more in line with a genre film than Silence of the Lambs is.
Yeah, I think that would be fair to say. Hannibal feels more like, I don't even want to say a horror movie because they both are, but this one, Hannibal feels more like a monster movie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it does. And that's kind of my thinking of it too, is that if you were like watching Silence of the Lambs going, this doesn't feel like a scary movie, because there are moments. I mean, there are moments of terror in it. Don't get me wrong, but it doesn't feel like it. Hannibal does feel like a scary movie. It does have that kind of vibe to it, with characters like Mason Verger and Hannibal himself eating brains. I got to mention before we kind of wrap this up about the last scene in the entire film, which is Hannibal on an airplane. Somehow he escaped. We don't know. Again, we don't know.
Dino De Laurentiis needs to keep it open for sequels, kids.
That's right. That's right. Dino says we got to keep it open for sequels. Got to give a cliffhanger. Okay. But he's on an airplane, and he's got his collection of foods, because apparently this is pre 9/11, folks. Okay. At least I think this came out right before. Yeah, it came out February of 2001. So this is pre 9/11, when you could bring
your own silverware on the plane. Your own
silverware, your own food. You could bring all that on the plane. And because I imagine people watch this now and be like, wait a minute, you could bring your own silverware and own food? Yeah. Pre 9/11, man. But he's eating his own little meal, because he says that he has to bring his own food, because he has a very particular appetite for things. It's like, no shit. And some little kid is like looking at his food, and he's going over all the different kinds of fancy food that he has, and he points to the brains that are in his Tupperware. And Hannibal's like, well, you don't want to try that. That's special. And the little kid's like, I want to try it. And Hannibal's like, okay, well, if you must. And he apparently gives him a little piece of brain, feeding it to children. Again, reinforcing that we're not supposed to like this guy.
Well, you are what you eat, I guess.
Brains to children, okay? Yeah. Yeah, and then it cuts to some cliche red eye thing that they do.
Well, because in the book he has red eyes for some reason.
He does?
Yes.
Really? I didn't know that.
I think it's supposed to be like some variation on brown, but it looks red. I don't think that they're literally saying he has red eyes, but it's inferred. Okay. So I thought it was really stupid. I thought that part was really stupid, and I thought the ending is leaves much to be desired. And I think it's one of those things like, do you want to go the full force of the book ending, or do you want to try something different? I think they tried something different. I just don't think it landed with the film. I just don't. Yeah. And I think that leaves a bad taste in people's mouth too, of like, oh, it's just open for a sequel. And
well, yeah.
In a way that I think Silence of the Lambs gets away with it, because when Silence of the Lambs came out, Thomas Harris had not written the Hannibal novel yet, and I don't think that there was supposed to be inferred like, oh, we're going to get more of these. I think it's just supposed to leave like an ominous thing in the air that, oh, Hannibal Lecter is out there. Not that like, oh, hey, kids, in 2 years, be ready for Hannibal Lecter in Thunderball. Like all the James Bond movies has the next one coming out. So yeah, I don't think that
Hannibal
was
Lecter will return in Thunderball.
Yeah. But this one clearly it's like, oh well, we're going to put him on a plane and he escapes so that we can make another one if we want to, and it's just it cheapens it. I mean, that, and like you said, the ending is that plane scene is really, really stupid.
It's just, well, again, it just, I know why they did it. They did it because they're like, you should not be rooting for this person. That is why they did it. I think a lot of this movie is, you should not be rooting for Hannibal Lecter at all. And I think when you have a cultural character like Hannibal Lecter that people are, doing impressions of and all sorts of shit, I don't think going that route is the right way. The reason why Freddy Krueger is so successful is because people root for him, even if you're not supposed to. I really believe that. You know, the reason why you had, like, I don't know how many Nightmare movies are out there. I think there are maybe, 9? 8 or 9?
Yes.
Yeah, maybe.
Not as many as Friday the 13th.
No, not as many as Friday the 13th. Friday the 13th is kind of crazy. But, you know, part of the reason that people love Freddy Krueger is because he's killing teenagers that are you know, crossing the rules of horror movies. And, yeah, you root for him. You're like, yeah, get that teenager. He was an asshole 2 scenes ago. Kill him. I mean, like, that's how he works. That's how the man works. And yeah, he does it in these most inventive, crazy ways, and that makes people root for him. Like, you know, when I think of, you know, Nightmare on Elm Street movies, I'm thinking of those dream sequences, you know, and yeah, they're over the top and yeah, they're goofy, but I love them. I do, you know. But the minute you try to, you know, force in my face the fact that this guy is a horrible human being, you recoil. And I think part of that is in Hannibal as well.
Yeah. I think that was also their version of, like, something jumping out at the end of the slasher movie. You drop your popcorn. It was like the subtle way of that, like, whoa, he fed brains to a kid. Whoa, you know. They had to end on a gross high note, you know, and couldn't pull Jennifer Love Hewitt under the bed like I Know What You Did Last Summer Part 2, you know.
We never got our third one, God damn it.
I still really know what you did last summer.
I super duper really know what you did last summer. Seriously. So to wrap this all up in a nice little bow with some fava beans and nice Chianti, John, what do you think? Is this really that awful?
No, God, no. And the thing is, we do some where we already kind of have our minds made up, like we did with Cable Guy.
Yeah.
And some movies we just, let's try Event Horizon again or Toy, and just like see, we're going back and actually deciding if it really is that awful. Now, this is the former for me. I love this movie. I took a new look at it for this episode, and I can see a lot of reasons a lot of people were turned off by this, and I don't question that at all. This movie isn't for everybody, but actually calling it as awful as so many of the critics did and a lot of fans of Silence of the Lambs did, I don't think that that's fair at all. Is it really that awful? Not at all for me. Not even close.
Cool. For me, I gotta say no, it's not. I I mean, even though I've brought up a lot of points, I think I've been more critical of it than you have, John.
Yes.
Which is fine. It's cool. It's cool. Do I think it is as awful as people say it is? Hell no. I've seen much worse movies than Hannibal, and even
in this series, go see Hannibal Rising if you want to. See
God, if you want to see some shit. Go watch Hannibal Rising. It's really bad. But do I think that the movie Hannibal is bad? No, I don't. I think that it has some problems. And I would be very interesting to see if they had stuck to some semblance of the original editing of the book, if that would have made this movie a little bit better. Because I think that's the biggest problem, is people get to that brain-eating scene, and then right after that, it just goes down fucking hill. And I think that if they had kept to the idea of making Clarice Starling a accomplice of some degree, kind of keeping with the theme they had set up with her kind of losing everything, which that's a good way of going, that it may not have been as terrible as people thought. But I know that also people would have probably been more up in arms over someone like the hero Clarice Starling being turned to the quote-unquote dark side. But I think that would fit more with the narrative that's being weaved here than what we got. So I definitely see problems with that. I see problems with the fact that a lot of these sections here feel like completely separate movies, which, again, that just kind of comes down to how do you weave an entire book together into a 2-hour-long movie.
Right.
So I see the problems, but do I think it's as terrible as people say it is? No. It's a Hannibal Lecter movie. You know, it's never going to be the original. And if you've rooted for Hannibal up until this point, there's probably going to be stuff in here that's going to make you not like him. And that's okay, because you're not supposed to like him. But no, it's not that awful.
There you have it, folks. If you do think it's really awful, let us know.
Yeah. Good talk, John. Good talk on this one.
I think we worked this out, man.
We did work this out. So, where can they find you at on the Twitter machine, John?
Well, in buildings mostly at this point. It's not safe to go outside. Oh, you mean on social media?
On the social media.
In the Twitterverse, the Unreal J Wolves.
Unreal J Wolves. Do you have any new YouTube episodes coming out? Gotta ask.
Yeah. Because I'm a weirdo, I have an episode coming out. So many questions on Air Bud, and I downloaded way too many videos of dogs humping for this episode, and giggling like I'm 5 years old. But yeah, on J-Dub's Video Nasties, I'll have an episode coming out on Air Bud. Got a couple interviews lined up. So yeah, if you haven't subscribed to J-Dub's Video Nasties, I'm sure there's a little something there for everybody. If you like this show, you'll probably like that too.
There is. You can find me at Brian Cocktails from the Psycho Show page. Be sure to check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Psycho Show. Be sure to like us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter at Psycho Show. You can also find us on the Epicast Network, epicastnetwork.com. If you have a favorite movie or question you want to throw our way, or I don't know if you're Hannibal Lecter calling us from Florence, again, you can contact us at cinematography.com. Be sure to subscribe to our show or follow us wherever you listen to audio, and we will see you next time.
Ooh, crossover event. Hannibal versus Air Bud. It's a new Freddy versus Jason.